My name is Laura Harris. I'm 35 years old, and I can still remember the exact vibration of my phone that morning, the text that ended the version of me he said he loved. You're too emotional for a woman. It's exhausting. The words sat there on the glowing screen, simple, sharp, cruel. I reread them over and over, trying to decode the moment when tenderness turned into embarrassment. Just 12 hours earlier, Jonas had held me in his arms as I cried, talking about my father's early-stage dementia. He'd stroked my hair, whispered, "It'll be okay," and I'd believed him. For a brief moment, I thought love meant being allowed to fall apart safely. But in the harsh morning light, my phone buzzed again. "I can't handle all this crying, Laura. You teared up at that wedding last month, then again watching that dog movie. It's not attractive. My friends even joke about how emotional you are." I stared at the messages. My throat tightened. My heart pounded in that nauseating way it does right before you either break down or shut down. And for the first time in my life, I chose the latter. I typed back only 3 words. "I'll work on that." Then I turned my phone face down on my desk. The sound of coworkers tapping keyboards filled the silence around me. That was the day I began disappearing. When I got home that night, Jonas was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through his phone, looking relaxed, content, as if nothing had happened. He smiled. "Hey babe, rough day." "Not really," I said softly, hanging my coat, careful to keep my voice neutral. He looked pleased, maybe even relieved. "Good. You've been intense lately." Intense. The word stung, but I swallowed it. Inside, something fragile, twisted, quietly snapping like a hairline fracture no one hears until the bone shifts wrong weeks later. He didn't notice. He never did. Later, while I chopped vegetables for dinner, he came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. "You know, I really do love you," he murmured into my neck. "You just feel everything so much. It gets heavy." I smiled. "You're right." He smiled back, relieved. He didn't see the way my hand tightened around the knife handle. That night, I lay awake beside him, eyes open in the dark, counting the rhythm of his breathing. I thought about how for 4 years he'd begged me to open up, to trust him with my feelings, to be real, honest, raw. And now here we were. My honesty was too much. My rawness was unattractive. My feelings embarrassing. I replayed his words in my mind until they blurred together. Too emotional. Unattractive. Embarrassing. He didn't want me softer. He wanted me smaller. And I just promised him exactly that. The next morning, I woke up before him, made coffee in silence, and stood by the window while the city outside flickered awake. I thought about my father sitting in his nursing home garden, smiling at nothing, forgetting more every day. His memory was fading, but his gentleness never had. When I was a kid, he used to say, "Feelings aren't weakness, Laura. They mean you're alive." Maybe that's why Jonas's message hurt so much. Because it made me wonder if emotions were weakness. Was my father's kindness also shameful? Was my love? By the time Jonas walked into the kitchen, I'd already decided. I would stop crying. Stop laughing too loudly. Stop feeling. He wanted a composed, logical woman, someone who wouldn't embarrass him. So I would become her. A week later, Jonas's grandmother passed away. When he called me, his voice was thick with grief. The old me would have dropped everything driven across town, sat beside him through the tears. The new me simply said, "I'm sorry for your loss. Let me know when the funeral is." There was silence. "Wait, you're not coming over?" he asked. "I'm at work," I replied. "You're strong. You'll handle it." He didn't answer. I hung up first. At the funeral, I stood beside him in a black dress, expressionless, hands clasped. He cried quietly. His mother dabbed at her eyes. His cousins clung to each other. Me, I watched detached. I remembered his words like a silent mantra. "Don't cry so much. It's embarrassing." When Jonas's mother hugged me afterward, she whispered, "He needs you right now." I nodded, but I didn't hold his hand. That night, he confronted me. "You were like a statue today. What's wrong with you?" I turned toward him slowly. Nothing. Just handling things like a woman should, calm, strong, composed. "Isn't that what you wanted?" His mouth opened, but no words came. I smiled faintly. "Good night, Jonas." When I lay in bed later staring at the ceiling, I realized something horrifying. The calmness he'd demanded from me didn't just protect me from pain. It protected me from everything, even love. And for the first time, that thought didn't make me cry. It made me feel powerful. Or maybe just empty. He said I was too emotional for a woman, so I became the woman without emotions. And the funny thing about silence, once you learn to live inside it, you start to wonder why you ever filled it with words in the first place. The morning after the funeral, Jonas barely spoke to me. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, jaw-tight eyes avoiding mine. I poured coffee for both of us, black and silent. He finally said, "You didn't even then stopped. Didn't even what I asked," calmly. He sighed, shaking his head. Never mind. But I knew what he meant. He meant I didn't cry. I didn't comfort him. I didn't perform emotion on command. I just gave him what he said he wanted, a woman who could handle things without getting emotional. At work, my colleagues noticed something too. I used to be the one who brought cupcakes for birthdays, who remembered everyone's coffee order. Now I kept my headphones and emails short, smiles shorter. My boss complimented my new focus. "You're really stepping up lately, Laura. Keep it up." Funny how emotional numbness looked a lot like professionalism. That weekend, Jonas's grief hit him harder. He came home drunk from his family's house, eyes red, slamming the door behind him. "She was the only one who really understood me," he mumbled, collapsing on the couch. I looked up from my laptop. "Your grandmother." He nodded, tears slipping down his face. I waited for a spark of sympathy to light inside me, but there was nothing. "I made you some tea," I said softly. He looked at me surprised. "You're not going to—" "I don't know, hold me." I shook my head. "You're strong. You'll be fine." He blinked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Days passed in a blur of muted tones. We ate dinner in silence. He tried to tell me about work, a client issue, a missed deadline, but my responses were mechanical. "Handle it. You'll figure it out. You always do." He laughed once, humorless. "Wow, you've really changed." I met his gaze. I improved. That was the first night he slept on the couch. A week later, his best friend Mason invited us to a double date with his fiancée. Old Laura would have dressed up, asked questions, kept the energy bright. New Laura wore black, said little, smiled, only when necessary. Mason's fiancée leaned across the table. "Laura, you okay? You've been quiet tonight." I looked at her with polite emptiness. "I'm fine. Just practicing emotional restraint. It's apparently attractive now." The table went silent. Jonas's fork clinked against his plate. Mason glanced between us. Everything all right?" I turned to Jonas. "Should I show them the text or just summarize it?" His face drained of color. "Laura, don't." "Oh, it's fine," I said calmly. "He just prefers women who don't cry at funerals, weddings, or movies about dying dogs. It's exhausting, apparently." Mason coughed. His fiancée looked horrified. Jonas's hand tightened around his glass. "That's not what I meant." I smiled, small, quiet, terrifying. "Then maybe you should have chosen your words more carefully." We drove home in complete silence. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might crack. Halfway there, he hissed, "You humiliated me." "Did I said softly. "Or did your own words do that?" He slammed the brakes at a red light. "What is wrong with you lately?" I turned to him, voice calm, steady. "What's wrong with me?" "I stopped being wrong for you. Isn't that what you wanted?" He stared at me, stunned, speechless. When the light turned green, he didn't move for a few seconds. "Laura," he whispered finally. "You're scaring me." "Good," I said. "Maybe fear will teach you what empathy couldn't." That night I lay awake again, not because I was angry, not even sad, just empty. And in that emptiness, I realized something strange. Being emotionless wasn't painful anymore. It was peaceful. No crying, no hoping, no disappointment. Jonas had called emotions a storm. Now the storm was gone, and all that was left was the stillness afterward. But stillness can be deceptive. Underneath it, something darker was forming. A part of me that had stopped wanting to fix things, stopped wanting him, and maybe in some quiet, terrible way, stopped wanting to feel anything at all. The next morning, Jonas tried to act normal. He made pancakes, kissed my cheek, said, "Let's just forget about last night." I smiled. Of course. He looked relieved. He didn't realize that I wasn't forgiving him. I was forgetting him piece by piece, emotion by emotion. He wanted a woman without feelings, and I was becoming her. The silence between us grew like mold, slow, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. Every conversation became an exchange of logistics. Bills, groceries, work, sleep. Even the air between us felt scheduled, sterile, devoid of warmth. And yet Jonas acted like this version of us was normal. One night he came home early, tossed his jacket on the chair, and said, "Let's go out. Dinner somewhere nice. We need this." I looked up from my laptop. "You said last week we should save money." He frowned. "I'm trying, Laura. I'm trying to make things better." Better? That word used to mean laughter connection, something alive. Now it just sounded like a sales pitch. Still, I agreed. Not because I wanted to, but because resistance took more energy than compliance. At the restaurant, the lighting was dim, the music soft, romantic supposedly. He reached for my hand across the table. I let him take it, but my fingers stayed limp. He sighed. You've been distant. Have I? You don't talk anymore. You don't smile. I sipped my wine. You once said my feelings were exhausting. I'm trying to be efficient. His mouth opened, then closed again. That's not what I... Then what did you mean? He looked away. You're twisting my words. No, I said calmly. I'm living them. Later that week, he invited friends over, Mason, of course, and two couples I barely knew. They laughed loudly, reminiscing about university days. I sat quietly refilling wine glasses when they emptied. At some point, one of the women, Emma, leaned toward me. So Laura Jonas says you've been really focused lately. Promotion coming. I smiled faintly. You could say that. I've been promoted to emotionally manageable. The table fell quiet. Mason chuckled awkwardly. That's dark. Jonas shot me a warning look. Not funny. Wasn't meant to be, I replied. He tried to laugh it off. She's joking, guys. She's been under a lot of stress. I turned to him, voice even. You're right, I have been. But I handle it without emotions like you prefer. Mason's fiancée raised her eyebrows. Wait, what? I tilted my head, pretending to think. Oh, didn't he tell you feelings are unattractive? I'm just being the woman he asked for. The laughter stopped entirely. You could have heard a fork drop. Jonas muttered, Jesus, Laura, and got up to pour another drink. After everyone left, the house felt heavier than ever. Jonas slammed the door, face red. What the hell was that? The truth, I said softly. You embarrassed me. I nodded. Now you know how it feels. He stared at me, bewildered. I never tried to humiliate you. You didn't have to. You just had to tell me who I wasn't good enough. He paced, running a hand through his hair. You're acting like a robot. I smiled faintly. You said that was what a strong woman looked like. He laughed bitterly. You're doing this on purpose. Punishing me. Not punishment, I corrected. Adaptation. His voice cracked. You're scaring me, Laura. Then maybe you understand how it feels to live with someone who doesn't see you. He stared at me for a long time, chest heaving. Then, without another word, he walked into the guest room and shut the door. In the days that followed, we stopped touching entirely. We moved through the house like ghosts inhabiting parallel worlds. The bed felt too big, the air too thin. And yet every night, he'd glance at me across the room, searching for the warmth he'd once taken for granted. It wasn't there anymore. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if I'd gone too far. Then I'd remember how he'd looked at me that day, disgusted by my tears, ashamed of my softness. And the sympathy would vanish again. One evening, Jonas's coworker called. I overheard him say, Yeah, she's been off lately. I don't know what happened. He paused, then laughed quietly. Yeah, I guess she's finally learning to be less emotional. I should be happy, right? I stood in the doorway, unseen, frozen. My nails dug into my palm until I felt the sharp sting of pain. It grounded me, proof I could still feel something. That night I said nothing, but I deleted every old photo of us from my phone. By the next week, even his voice started to sound like background noise. He talked. I nodded. He complained. I listened. The rhythm of our days became mechanical. And when he finally said, I don't even recognize you anymore, I replied, Good. You never really saw me in the first place. That night I dreamed of my father. He was sitting in his garden again, smiling faintly, holding a wilted flower. When I called to him, he looked up confused, like he couldn't remember my name. I woke up with tears on my cheeks, my first in weeks. But when Jonas rolled over groggy and asked, You okay? I wiped my face and whispered, Fine. Because I wasn't his emotional woman anymore. I was his mirror, reflecting the emptiness he'd created. And soon he'd see what it was like to love someone who no longer existed. It happened quietly the day Jonas broke. No yelling, no slamming doors, just the soft sound of a man realizing he'd built a cage and accidentally stepped inside it himself. He came home late, looking worn down, tie, crooked eyes, dull. I bombed the presentation, he muttered. I looked up from my laptop. That happens, he blinked. I worked on it for a month. You'll figure it out next time. Could you at least pretend to care? He snapped. I tilted my head. Why would I pretend you said emotions are exhausting? The air between us cracked, invisible but sharp. He stared at me like he was finally seeing the shape of his own cruelty. For a few days, he tried to fight it. He'd bring home flowers, text heart emojis, force cheerful conversations. It all felt mechanical, like he was reading from a relationship manual written by someone who'd never been loved. Then came the night everything turned. Jonas's best friend Mason called to tell him that his college buddy, someone they'd both known for years, had died in a car accident. I watched Jonas crumble on the couch, head in his hands. She had 2 kids, he whispered. She was only 34. I handed him a cup of coffee. Tragic. When's the funeral? He looked up, stunned. That's it? That's all you have to say? I shrugged. There's not much else to say. These things happen. His face twisted in disbelief. You're heartless. I'm logical, I corrected. You told me that's what strength looks like. He stood up so fast the mug slipped from his hand and shattered against the floor. Feel something, he yelled. Anything I watched the coffee spread across the tiles, dark and slow. You're going to stain the grout, I said quietly. He stared at me, trembling. You're not human anymore. I met his gaze evenly. You told me emotions made me weak. I believed you. That night, he packed a bag and left for his friend's apartment. I didn't stop him. I didn't even watch him go. I just cleaned up the coffee piece by piece until the floor looked exactly as it had before he'd broken it. But something about that spotless tile haunted me, because no matter how much I scrubbed, I could still see the outline of the stain when I turned off the lights. 3 days later, I visited my father. He was sitting under the same oak tree at the nursing home, humming a song I didn't recognize. Hi, Dad, I said softly, sitting beside him. He turned to me, eyes gentle but confused. You're my daughter. Yes, I whispered. Laura. He smiled faintly. Pretty name. Something inside me cracked, small, controlled, but real. For the first time in months, I wanted to cry. But the tears wouldn't come. I watched my father, the kindest man I'd ever known, slowly disappear behind the fog of his own mind. And I realized that Jonas hadn't just stolen my softness, I'd given it away, piece by piece, every time I chose silence over honesty. When Jonas came back a week later, he looked smaller somehow, eyes red, voice hoarse. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded. I've been staying at Mason's, he began, and I can't stop thinking about us, about how we used to be. I said nothing. He exhaled shakily. You're right. I said terrible things. I made you feel like your emotions were wrong. But this isn't you, Laura. I smiled faintly. It is now. No, he said, voice breaking. You're punishing me. I told you before. I'm not punishing you. I'm showing you what you asked for. He rubbed his temples. Please just feel something. Anger, sadness, anything. I miss you. I looked at him calmly. You miss the version of me you were allowed to criticize. He started crying, then small, desperate sounds. For a split second, I wanted to comfort him, but when I reached for that old instinct, it wasn't there anymore. Just empty space where empathy used to live. That night, he moved into the guest room again. I listened to him cry through the wall, not sobbing, just quiet, broken sounds that made the air vibrate with regret. And for the first time, I realized what real power feels like. Not revenge, not victory, just control, terrifying, cold control. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, that control began to feel like a curse. Because I'd finally become what he wanted, and I didn't want to be her anymore. 2 weeks later, Jonas's mother called me. Laura, he's not doing well, she said. He blames himself for everything. He should. I replied. She sighed. He made a mistake, dear. We all say hurtful things sometimes. I closed my eyes. Some words don't just hurt. They reshape you. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered, You sound like you've stopped loving him. I almost smiled. I stopped needing him. It's not the same thing. That night I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman I'd become. Calm, composed, perfectly detached. He'd told me crying was embarrassing. Now, even when I wanted to, I couldn't. He told me to be strong. Now I was unbreakable and utterly alone. In the end, I'd won. But victory, I learned, doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like frostbite. Numb, quiet, permanent. 2 months passed. The silence had become its own language between us, fluent, familiar, deadly. Jonas still lived in the same apartment, but it was like sharing space with a ghost. He moved softly now, like he was afraid of making noise that would remind me he still existed. He tried to fix things in the only way he knew how, by performing apologies instead of feeling them. He cleaned the kitchen, bought flowers, cooked dinner. None of it mattered, because every gesture arrived without the thing that once connected us, emotion. He had drained it out of me, and now we were both drowning in the dry air he'd created. One evening, I came home to find candles lit on the dining table. Jonas was dressed neatly, eyes bright with nervous energy. "Sit," he said softly. "Please." I sat. He poured wine and cleared his throat. "I've been going to therapy." I blinked. "You?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah. I've been reading about toxic masculinity, emotional suppression, all that stuff. I get it now. What I said to you, it was cruel. You were right." I watched him talk, hands trembling slightly, voice breaking in places. He sounded genuine, and yet I felt nothing. It was like my brain recognized his sincerity, but my heart didn't have the receptors anymore. "I want us back," he whispered. "The real us. Please, Laura." I stared at the table. The real us. The one where I was too emotional for you, or the one where I'm exactly what you wanted. Calm, composed, manageable. He flinched. "I don't deserve you." "No," I said quietly, "you don't. But you made sure I wouldn't deserve myself either." After dinner, he followed me into the living room. "Say something," he begged. "Yell at me. Hate me. Just feel something." I turned to him, calm, steady. "Jonas, you told me emotions were weakness. I trained myself out of them. Now you want them back." "Yes," he said, voice cracking, "because without them, you're not you anymore." I looked him in the eye. "Then congratulations. You killed the woman you loved." He took a step towards me, but I stepped back. "Laura, please, don't," I said sharply. "You wanted a strong woman. This is strength." He broke then, really broke. Dropped to his knees, crying, shaking, whispering apologies like prayers. For a long moment, I just watched. Then I realized how cruel it was that the only way he could finally understand my pain was by living in the absence of it. That night, he slept in the guest room again. The next morning, I found a letter on the kitchen table. "I'm going to stay with Mom for a while. I don't know how to fix this. I just know I ruined everything. You didn't deserve it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I folded the note neatly and placed it in the drawer next to my father's medical bills. Another piece of paper filled with regret. My father's condition had worsened. He forgot my name entirely that month. The nurses said it was normal, expected. But I couldn't stop staring at him. Smiling, humming, lost in the fog of his fading mind. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. When I got home that evening, Jonas's scent still lingered on the pillows. For a moment I stood in the doorway and the emptiness hit me. Not grief, not anger, just the cold realization that even the pain had stopped meaning anything. It wasn't peace, it was paralysis. A week later, Jonas returned. He looked thinner, quieter. He said, "I've been thinking about us a lot, about what I did to you, about how I wanted control and I lost everything that mattered." I nodded. "That's what control does." He exhaled shakily. "Can we start over?" "No," I said softly. "Because I can't start anything from where I am. There's nothing left to give." He swallowed hard. "You really don't feel anything for me anymore?" I looked at him and the words came out before I could stop them. "I feel nothing. You got what you asked for." He stared at me for the long time, then quietly he said, "You win." And I whispered back, "No, nobody wins here." The day he moved out, I didn't cry. I watched him carry the last box out the door, his silhouette framed by afternoon light. He hesitated, looked back once, then left. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was just final. That night, I lit the fireplace. On the table beside me sat a small stack of things, our photos, his letters, and the printout of that first text message. "You're too emotional for a woman." I read it one last time, then I struck a match. The paper curled, darkened, and burned until nothing but ash remained. The flames flickered in my eyes, reflecting back a woman I didn't recognize. He wanted a woman without emotions. Now he could keep the ghost he created. A week later, I got a call from his mother. "He's not doing well," she said. "He's depressed. He keeps saying he ruined you." I stared out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. "I think we ruined each other," I said softly and hung up. When I visited my father again, he didn't remember me again. But when I held his hand, he smiled anyway, humming that same forgotten tune. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something small, distant, but alive. Maybe love isn't about who breaks you. Maybe it's about who helps you remember you're still capable of feeling even after you swore you'd never feel again. I squeezed my father's hand and whispered, "It's okay, Dad. You can forget me for now. I'll remember for both of us." Then, for the first time in months, my eyes filled with tears. And this time I didn't stop them. Because this time, crying wasn't weakness. It was proof I wasn't gone yet. It's been 6 months since the day Jonas told me I was too emotional for a woman. Half a year since the moment I decided to turn off everything soft inside me and become the kind of woman he could tolerate. Half a year since I realized that in trying to please him, I erased myself. I live alone now. A smaller apartment, quiet neighborhood, no one to measure my voice against, no one to monitor my moods. The walls hum with stillness, and I've learned to live with it, even like it sometimes. In the mornings, I water my plants. They thrive in silence better than I ever did. I still visit my father every weekend. He rarely remembers my name, but his smile feels like a distant echo of something real, something that once existed between me and Jonas before it soured. Sometimes when I make coffee, I catch myself pouring 2 cups out of habit, old reflex. Then I pause, pour one back into the pot, and whisper under my breath, "He got what he asked for." Because he did. Last month, Jonas texted me, "I'm sorry, Laura. I see everything now. I've been in therapy. I understand what I did. You were right. I was afraid of emotion because it made me feel weak. I was wrong. You were never too emotional. You were human. I just wasn't brave enough to love you the way you deserved." I stared at the message for a long time. There was a time when words like that would have shattered me open, made me hope again, forgive again. But now they just felt heavy, too late, too clean, too easy. I typed one reply. "You taught me that words don't mean much without empathy." And I never heard back. A week later, I ran into his mother at the grocery store. She looked tired but kind. "He's still not himself," she said quietly. "Keeps saying he broke the best thing he ever had." I smiled softly. "He didn't break me. He just misplaced me." She frowned, not understanding, and I didn't explain. Some things don't need to be understood, just survived. That night, I sat by my window and watched the rain streak down the glass. The city lights blurred like tears that the sky refused to hold in. I thought about how Jonas used to say, "Don't cry, it's embarrassing," and I laughed softly, genuinely, because crying was the only thing that ever kept me real. He wanted a woman who didn't feel. Now he lives with that wish. He's surrounded by silence he created, haunted by the absence of the emotions he mocked. And me, I finally learned the difference between weakness and sensitivity. Weakness is pretending not to care when something hurts. Sensitivity is surviving it and still being willing to feel again. 2 months ago, I started journaling. Not about Jonas, not about what he did, but about what I almost lost myself. Every page bleeds with small rediscoveries. The taste of coffee when it's still hot. The way the sky smells before it rains. The warmth of a stranger's kindness that doesn't demand anything in return. I even started smiling again, not for anyone else's comfort, but because it feels good. Last week, I visited my father. He was sitting by the window, humming that same tune. When I walked in, he looked up and said, "Hi, sweetheart." He remembered me, just for a moment, but it was enough. I sat beside him, held his hand, and whispered, "I missed you." He smiled, eyes bright. "Don't cry, Laura." I laughed softly through tears. "No, Dad. This time I'll cry all I want." Because that's the thing Jonas never understood. Emotions don't make you weak. They make you human. And if that's embarrassing, then I'll wear the shame proudly. When I left the nursing home that evening, the sun was setting, the kind that paints everything gold before it disappears. For a brief second, I thought I saw Jonas across the street watching me. Maybe it was just someone who looked like him. Or maybe life has a cruel sense of symmetry. Either way, I didn't stop walking. Because the truth is simple now. He said I was too emotional for a woman. And in trying to fix me, he broke himself. The irony. He'll spend the rest of his life wishing I'd feel something for him again. And I will just not the way he wants. Pity isn't weakness.